Pido orden a la sala para iniciar con el debate general.
Please come to order so we can start our general debate. Good morning.
Reanudamos el punto.
We will resume with item 5A on the agenda for this general debate, and I will give the floor to the delegation of Andorra. Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Government of Andorra, it's an honor to participate at this meeting of states parties of the CRPD. Andorra continues to work to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The actions we have taken are not only in terms of specific regulations, but also in terms of implementing programs and services to ensure equality, equity, and in a real and effective manner. Of course, always with the participation and cooperation of associations of persons with disabilities as part of a consultation process to resolve the possible deficiencies and to work for the recommendations of the Convention. To guarantee flexibility, the Government of Andorra is working to change its law on flexibility, and we are pleased to inform that today we have a text which will be before Parliament soon. Also, in order to adapt our legislation to the Convention, the Government of Andorra has approved the regulation to apply measures in order to guarantee the vote for persons with disabilities so they can exercise their political rights in full security. We'd like to focus on this important aspect, and I would like to offer a few aspects of this regulation, such as access to electoral information, flexibility, movement to go and vote, and the regulation also includes basic formats that can be used, following as much as possible the universal formats for persons with disabilities. For example, for access to information, we can use sign language and captions. For those who may have cognitive disabilities, symbols. And for those with visual impairments, Braille and other audio issues. In terms of accessible vote for persons with visual disabilities, we have established mechanisms which guarantee flexibility in the vote while respecting the secret by implementing a QR code and in the election propaganda. We guarantee the right of access to information and the content of the ballots. It is possible to consult a person of trust while voting. These measures were applied in the recent general elections on the 2nd of April, and the results were quite satisfactory for persons with disabilities and associations. Andorra will continue to defend the promotion and effective implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities while evaluating disabilities and always in keeping with the Convention. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the delegation of Andorra, and I now call on the Philippines.
Vice President, the Philippines congratulates you and the members of the Bureau on your election. We are confident that you will steer this conference to a successful outcome, and we assure you of our full support. The Philippines remains steadfast in taking all necessary measures to ensure that the rights and dignities of persons with disabilities are respected, promoted, and protected. We recognize that the CRPD is both a human rights and a development document. Our Magna Carta for Persons with Disabilities, enacted in 1992, has been continually enhanced to respond to the evolving needs and concerns of the sector, stressing that persons with disabilities are rights holders and not objects of charity. The process of updating the Magna Carta, true to the principles of the CRPD, involves the active participation of and gives weight to the voice of persons with disabilities, from formulation to implementation. Additionally, the state developed a human rights-based approach to legislation, which assesses legislative measures vis-a-vis a human rights principle. The government works to align its national action plans with the CRPD. The Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 guarantees strengthened social protection programs and universal accessibility for persons with disabilities, including policies that promote inclusive education and increased political participation. The Ambition 2040 or Vision 2040 strives towards a high-level economic performance for the Philippine society, where persons with disabilities are among the priority groups. In pursuing their right to access employment and livelihood opportunities, the government is leveraging technology-enabled business models and providing a supportive policy environment for them. It aims to close the digital divide and make technology accessible for persons with disabilities. The government espouses disability-inclusive governance through a law that mandates the establishment of a Disability Affairs Office in every local government unit. Preference is given for qualified persons with disabilities to head such offices. These offices are enjoined to coordinate with local disability organizations, allowing the government to reach the grassroots level. The Philippines, through its whole-of-nation approach, abides by its commitments under the ancient strategy of making the rights real for persons with disabilities and the recently adopted Jakarta Declaration on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities 2023 to 2032. While substantial strides had been made to fully implement the CRPD nationally, challenges remain, including in the area of data and statistics. The Philippines works together with our international partners, including organizations of persons with disabilities, to address these challenges. Thank you.
Agradecer.
I thank the distinguished delegate of the Philippines, and I now give the floor to the delegation of Bolivia.
Gracias, señora vicepresidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and guests. Firstly, my delegation joins in the statement made by Iceland on behalf of a group of countries and the statement made by LGBTI group of which my country is a part. In our national capacity, we would like to add the following. Bolivia is deeply committed to the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This international instrument is binding, and it is part of Bolivia's internal domestic law. The treaty, as well as the Inter-American Convention on the same subject, have been important tools to achieve the express recognition of persons with disabilities as subjects of law in the Constitution of my country. My country has been developing different measures to eliminate the many and interrelated practices of discrimination and access to work, education, and health, just to name a few. In terms of the right to health, Bolivia has a specific guide on sexual and reproductive rights for persons with disabilities. This guide should be applied by all health personnel in the public system. The purpose is that persons with disabilities should have guidance as users of health services. In terms of access to work, we have Law 977, which offers also economic assistance to persons with disabilities. Through these norms, it is possible to include persons with disabilities in places of work, especially in public institutions. The law also creates a monthly bond for persons with disabilities in serious or very serious situations. We also have a specific guide on the operation of municipal units toward the full integration of persons with disabilities and to implement public policies. My delegation, Madam Vice President, is developing a broad policy of inclusion which translates into the principle of living well. It is part of a process of social transformation in which the movement of persons with disabilities in Bolivia have been key. Lastly, coming back to the international level, my delegation supports resolutions of the General Assembly to promote specific measures so we will have a more tolerant, diverse, and inclusive world. An example of this is Resolution 77203, which encourages states to adopt national plans to revitalize indigenous languages, including sign languages. This is a concrete initiative that can lead to differences in the lives of persons with audio disabilities and who identify as indigenous. This is a step toward quality education and cultural rights. Thank you.
Agradecemos a la honorable.
We thank the distinguished delegate of Bolivia, and I now give the floor to the delegation of the United Republic of Tanzania.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, including behind me our Member of Parliament from Tanzania, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Chair, I congratulate Chair on your well-deserved election. Tanzania assures you and your Bureau full cooperation and support during your tenure. Madam Chair, Tanzania became party to the Convention on 30th March 2007. By becoming a party to the Convention, Tanzania has proceeded to take policy, legislative, administrative, and other measures to ensure and promote the full realization of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for persons with a disability without discrimination of any kind on the basis of disability. Disability issues are prioritized in our financial 5 years development plan 2021-22, 2025-26 that also addresses issues relating to ensuring equal access and accessibility of sexual and reproductive health care, digital accessibility, and reaching the underrepresented groups of a person with a disability. Madam Chair, to testify this, Tanzania has established better bases for full inclusion and active participation of persons with a disability in public and political position. Currently, there are 9 members of parliament, 6 women and 3 men, 1 deputy minister, 2 permanent secretaries, 2 ambassadors, 1 judge of the High Court, 3 deputy permanent secretaries, 2 members of the House of Representatives in Zanzibar, 16 councillors, and many other in private sector. Tanzania has also embarked on allocating 2% of the local government authorities' own revenue to support income generation activities of the person with the disabilities, with significantly change the life of person with a disability and reduce dependence. In addition, Tanzania is currently reviewing its policies and regulations to address gaps in key needs of the person with a disability. All these are done with the aim to ensure persons with a disability fully participate in every aspect of their life in their societies. Madam Chair, Tanzania provides for free education to all students in the country, including students with a disability from the primary level to a secondary level. We also stress on the provision of vocational training to this special group to ensure that children with a disability are prepared to live an independent life and can have an opportunity to contribute to the economy of their country. We have also increased the provision of technical aids and assistive devices to persons with a disability and therefore welcome further assistance in this regard. Madam Vice President, as we focus on high-quality statistics and disaggregation of data by disability, Tanzania has developed an electronic person with a disability management information system. The system will collect and generate data and statistics that will be used to support the formulation of evidence-based policies as key to all aspects of the implementation of disability, inclusive policies and programs in line with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with a Disability. Finally, Madam Vice President, my delegation would like to reaffirm our commitment to the implementation of this convention and appeal for stronger cooperation in the implementation of this convention while leaving no one behind. Thank you. Asante sana.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. representative of the United Republic of Tanzania. I now invite the delegation of Cuba to make its statement. Madam Vice President, Cuba ratifies its commitment to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities while granting great importance to the Conference of States Parties as the right space in which to strengthen the observance of the Convention. The protection and care of persons with disabilities in our country is fully in keeping with the Convention. That legal protection was ratified and strengthened through the new Cuban Constitution adopted in 2019. We have a system of political institutions, public institutions, legal norms, economic resources, and qualified personnel to protect the human rights and meet the needs of this group. Recently, we established the Cuban Association of Persons with Intellectual Disabilities. This new association is added to 3 other groups of persons with disabilities in our country. Madam Vice President, the new family code, which we have in the country since 2022, favors even more the full development of the sexual and reproductive rights in the socio-family environment, irrespective of the situation of disability the person may be in. It's also self-determination and independence for persons and allows them to have equal opportunities in their family life. In Cuba, state, society, and family have the obligation to protect, promote, and ensure the full exercise of the rights of persons with disabilities. The Cuban state create the necessary conditions to rehabilitate or improve the quality of life, personal autonomy, inclusion, and social participation of persons with disabilities, despite the effects of the economic, trade, and financial blockade imposed by the government of the United States. Despite the progress made by the country in this area, important challenges lie ahead, which we will continue to overcome with the strong participation of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Cuba. And after 5 representatives and participants, we now give the floor to an NGO, to the Australian Federation of Organizations for Disabilities, AFDO.
Hello, my name is Trevor Carroll, and I'm not very happy. I travelled 25 hours on the plane to get here from Australia, and technology was available for the opening ceremony to provide captions on screen yesterday for people like me who needed them, but they didn't turn on until 10:35. This excluded me and many others, and given that technology is the theme, one of the sub-themes for this conference, this was unacceptable. Likewise, the collection of disability disaggregated data can be a double-edged sword. Whilst it's proven to be useful to identify service gaps for people with disability to support their inclusion, it's also been used by some state parties to restrict their eligibility in times of budget austerity or for political ideological reasons, and this is also unacceptable. The collection of disability disaggregated data has been an agenda item at last COSP and many international disability forums since the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted at the UN Summit in New York in 2015. I've been coming here now 8 or 9 times to COSP, and we've been talking about this ever since. Development in technology under Article 9 have been a significant enabler in collecting this disaggregated data. Yet there have been many natural disasters and climate change-related events around the world that have displaced and cost the lives of millions of persons with disabilities since 2015. So this disaggregated data does not include specific data that identifies the details of people with disabilities, such as their names or where they live or how to contact them. However, this is a serious barrier to providing an immediate response to those of us like me with disability who might be affected by natural disasters and climate change events under Article 11. In Australia, for example, during floods, fires or cyclones, our national and state emergency disaster response agencies don't have databases that showing which individuals like me with disability that need emergency evacuation with support doesn't even say where we live. Me and many others with disability happen to be included in disaggregated data, but we also need statistically reliable base services in place that mean we don't want to be among the list of casualties if a bushfire or flood prevents emergency services from finding and evacuating us in advance. We need to explore technological, practical and logistical ways to overcome this privacy barrier consistent with Article 22 to ensure that no one with disability is left behind dead after an emergency. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, representative of AFDO, an NGO. I now invite the representative of the delegation of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an honor to be here representing the government of the Republic of Korea. Since joining the Convention on the Rights of Persons with a Disability in 2008, the Korean government has steadily endeavored to harmonize its national policies with the CLPD. The Korean government ratified the optional protocol in December 2022. Through this, we hope that the individual complaint procedure will guarantee a more effective implementation of the CLPD. Also, the Korean government has been actively carrying out the tasks related to the United Nations CLPD as a national project. To this end, the Korean government is preparing measures on the national level to fully implement the concluding observation made by CLPD on the combined second and third period reports last year. In March this year, the government collected general opinions from persons with disabilities and related experts to establish the sixth comprehensive policy plan for persons with disabilities 2023 to 2027, a mid-long-term plan to provide direction to disability-related policies for the next 5 years. This comprehensive plan contains mid-long-term vision and strategy to create a happy society that realizes the freedom and equality of persons with disabilities, including the introduction of integrated services customized for needs of persons with disabilities. Specifically, it includes strengthening life cycle care for persons with developmental disabilities and services to reduce the burden on the parents of children with disabilities. The adoption of a personal budget system through which persons with disabilities can select the services by themselves. The expansion of healthcare services and infrastructure for persons with disabilities in the community. The reinforcement of transportation and infrastructure to ensure the right to mobility. And the expansion of support for daily sports, culture, arts, tourism, etc. Despite the achievements and plans mentioned so far, our government is well aware of the challenges to implementing the CLPD due to the limitation of the workforce and budget. The government of the Republic of Korea will devote its best efforts to ensure the rights of persons with disability in all areas of life by having discussions with diverse stakeholders, including persons with disabilities, academia, and legislative bodies to align with the policy changes of international society. Thank you.
Agradecemos.
I thank the distinguished delegate of the Republic of Korea and now call on the delegation of the Republic of Moldova.
Madam Chair, the Republic of Moldova aligns itself with the statement of the European Union and wishes to convey some additional remarks in its national capacity. Madam Chair, the theme and sub-themes of this year conference are specifically pertinent. By sharing the best practices and problems faced in implementation of the Convention, we all learn to work better both at national and international level and to identify the most appropriate solutions. As a party to the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Republic of Moldova is committed to ensuring the fundamental human rights of all persons with disabilities and creating an enabling environment for their effective participation in all spheres of their life. Having taken relevant measures to harmonize the national legislation with the CRPD provisions, significant progress has been made and achieved in the inclusion of people with disabilities in social life and protection, medical assistance and rehabilitation, access to education, work, public life, and other utilities and services to ensure that disabled people enjoy the same rights. In this vein, the Republic of Moldova has adopted the law on social inclusion of persons with disabilities, the concept of the information system determination of disability and work capacity, and the regulation of the organization and functioning of the information system, determination of disability and work capacity, and in addition, the set of indicators for monitoring the implementation of CRPD was adopted. The most relevant to the subject addressed today is the National Program for the Social Inclusion of Persons with Disability 2017-2022, aimed to address the problems faced by persons with disability in my country. The implementation of CRPD provisions and recommendations, as well as the observation of experts of the UN Committee of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Another important priority for the Republic of Moldova is the implementation of a national program for the deinstitutionalization of persons with intellectual and psychological disabilities in the residential institutions for the years 2018-2026. Madam Chair, whatever progress has been made around the world in the implementing of the Convention and under discussion, further tangible efforts and actions are to be undertaken at the national and international level to ensure real protection and promotion of the rights and dignity of people with disabilities. Among other actions, to ensure full mainstream of persons with disabilities into societies and their access to the services, more investments are needed in disability-friendly infrastructure and better access to technology, including digital assistance technologies accessible to them. Further strengthening and expansion of global cooperation to make these technologies available to all people with disabilities remain one of the foremost objectives. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the strong commitment of my country to further implement the provisions of the Convention and to develop best practices for its full implementation for the benefit of all, so that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the delegation of Moldova, and now I invite the delegation of Sweden to take the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. I would like to start by underscoring that Sweden fully aligns itself with the statement made by the European Union and its member states. Despite the steadily growing rate of ratification of the CRPD, persons with disabilities continue to face barriers to their participation as equal members of society, and violations of their human rights continue to be reported in all parts of the world. Progress have been achieved through, for example, references to persons with disabilities and clear commitments to leave no one behind in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, but this is not enough. Although persons with disabilities are included in different strategies and policies, certain groups continue to be left behind and are not given the support and assistance they need. We have to step up and make sure we reach and include the underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities. Development cooperation is an important tool for reaching those left behind, and Sweden is a long-standing donor in support of the rights of persons with disabilities globally. But how effective are our national policies and strategies to implement the CRPD? And how can and should we measure progress? These are crucial questions, and we welcome the opportunity to follow developments made by other countries in this area and the possibility to share relevant information and experiences, not least from the representatives from the organizations of persons with disabilities. During the Swedish presidency of the EU, our ambition has been to support the effective implementation of the Convention by promoting EU strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities and by highlighting Member States' relevant national strategies and action for mutual learning. We hope the side event hosted by the Permanent Mission of Sweden and the EU Commission that took place this week gave information and insight in the ongoing work. This conference has been a source of inspiration, bringing together so much expertise and experience, and a fantastic opportunity to learn from each other. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Representative of Sweden. I now invite the delegation of Pakistan to make a statement.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Harmonizing national policies and strategies with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is fundamental to addressing developmental needs and human rights of persons with disabilities for an inclusive world, leaving no one behind. As a state party to Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities since 2011, the government of Pakistan continues to make efforts to promote and protect human rights and developmental needs of persons with disabilities by harmonizing national strategies and policies for implementing CRPD through a wide range of legal, policy, and administrative measures, including formulation of ICT Act for Persons with Disabilities 2021, reservation of 2% quota across the board in public sector employment, integration of rights of persons with disabilities in all programs and activities related to relief and rehabilitation by National Disaster Management Authority, establishment of National Steering Committee on Assistive Technology, inclusion of universal health coverage and social protection schemes, and introduction of inclusive education system. Madam Vice President, for addressing challenges faced by persons with disabilities due to underdevelopment, lack of socio-economic inclusion, and human rights violations, we must take transformative actions at the international, regional, and national level. First, the international community must step up its effort to fulfill sustainable development needs for persons with disabilities by implementing sustainable development goals and associated targets. 2, remove attitudinal and environmental barriers and provide reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities. 3, member states, United Nations, and business enterprises should create employment opportunities. As a positive measure, employment quotas may be reserved for persons with disabilities. 4, financial and technical assistance must be ensured by international community for rehabilitation and counseling services for persons with disabilities, especially in developing countries. 5, financial and technical assistance must be provided for promoting assistive technology devices, products, and services for more than 1 billion persons with disabilities in the world. Finally, while bridging the digital divide, digital inclusion should be ensured by the member states and United Nations by following web content accessibility guidelines. Let us reaffirm nothing about us without us. Thank you.
I thank the participation of the delegation of Pakistan, and I invite the delegation of Burkina Faso to make a statement.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Burkina Faso is delighted to participate in this session of the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and we commend the theme that has been chosen, and we congratulate you on your wonderful conduct of our work. This conference is vitally important for my country. We can draw on the experiences that are shared by other countries. In Burkina Faso, persons with disabilities face difficulties that are exacerbated by the security and humanitarian crises that my country is experiencing. These difficulties include continued prejudices against persons with disabilities, difficulties in accessing basic social services, a low level of access to employment and professional training, a low level of access to information and communications technologies as well. To remedy these difficulties, Burkina Faso has joined the majority of the initiatives taken at the international level for persons with disabilities and has implemented specific measures and policies that are designed to be inclusive. Madam Vice President, my country has taken several actions and efforts are ongoing to achieve real and effective inclusion of persons with disabilities. The primary actions that have been taken are as follows: the adoption and implementation of the National Strategy for the Protection and Promotion of Persons with Disabilities, which covers the period 2021 to 2025, the establishment of free care for pregnant women and children under 5, including women and children with disabilities, raising awareness about reproductive health of persons with disabilities and restoring free family planning services, training and providing students and pupils with disabilities and disabled persons organizations with adapted IT services, promoting inclusive education and the vocational training of persons with disabilities, the development of care activities for persons with disabilities that are underrepresented in life autonomy areas, support for psychosocial care, the translation of television news in sign language. Madam Vice President, all of these actions were possible thanks to the technical and financial support provided by our development partners, including UN institutions, but also non-governmental organizations. This is an opportunity for me to reiterate the gratitude to them of the government and people of Burkina Faso for their tireless support. I would also like to take this opportunity to invite our bilateral and multilateral partners, as well as non-governmental organizations, to provide further support to Burkina Faso to strengthen our operational capacities in order to allow us to best respond to the many needs of persons with disabilities to ensure that nobody is left behind. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Burkina Faso, and we invite the NGO Consejo Internacional to make a statement.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the International Council for Education of People with Visual Impairment, or ICEVI, promotes inclusive, equitable, quality education for persons with blindness, low vision, deaf-blindness, and multiple disability. Today, on behalf of our members, I draw your attention to the inequality and marginalisation experienced by children and adults with deaf-blindness in all aspects of life. Persons with deaf-blindness represent less than 2% of the world's population, and their abilities and requirements are diverse and individual. In many countries, only 1/5 or 20% of primary-aged children with deaf-blindness are enrolled in school. ICEVI and our member organisations have joined the global deaf-blind education campaign that was launched in January 2023 by Deaf-Blind International and partners. The campaign builds on research published by the World Federation of the Deaf-Blind in 2018 and 2022. The Global Deaf-Blind Education Campaign includes 3 priority recommendations of the World Federation of the Deaf-Blind, which are as follows. 1. Legal representation and recognition of deaf-blindness as a unique disability, and as a first step to developing policies and services for children and adults with deaf-blindness. 2. Adoption of a twin-track approach to inclusive education, consisting of Track 1, formal, informal and non-formal inclusive education according to local contexts, and Track 2, provision of publicly funded human, financial and physical resources. And Priority 3, establishment of cross-border networks with active participation of persons with deaf-blindness and their representative organisations to develop deaf-blind specific services, including training of professionals, families and caregivers, early identification, assessment and referral services, deaf-blind interpreting services, and national deaf-blind awareness and advocacy programs. So in conclusion, the International Council for Education of People with Visual Impairment calls upon states, parties and signatories to the UN CRPD to realise the promise of the CRPD, leaving no child with deaf-blindness behind. Thank you.
Damos las gracias.
I thank the representative of the International Council for the Education of People with Visual Impairment, and I welcome the representative of Azerbaijan for his statement.
Dear Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Azerbaijan ratified CRPD and its protocol in 2008 and was among the first countries to endorse these documents and has submitted 3 reports on measures taken to implement its obligations under the CRPD. The new law on the rights of persons with disabilities prepared in line with CRPD was adopted in 2018. According to the law, the government has approved 17 new legislative acts addressing a wide range of disability-related rights and encouraging the inclusion of persons with disabilities in society. All notions considered offensive or carrying negative connotations with regard to persons with disabilities have been replaced by neutral words and expressions in national legislation. As a result of large-scale digitalization program in the social field, more than 140 social services have undergone an electronic transformation. 51 proactive services have been introduced since 2019, ensuring easy access to social services for persons with disabilities. Social payments on disabilities are assigned proactively without any application or submitting any documents. Launched in 2022, the Labor and Employment Electronic System offers a unified labor relations platform for both businesses and employees and gives us a unique opportunity to receive all requests for reasonable accommodation and track their implementation. Amendments were made to the legislation in order to create equal conditions and opportunities for the effective use of websites by persons with disabilities. According to the amendments, basic principles of web content accessibility guideline were followed to enhance accessibility of state agencies' websites. In addition, annual state monitoring is carried out to ensure the implementation of disability rights, including the accessibility of websites. For this purpose, a special working group was created and persons with disabilities, representatives of civil society and experts were included in this working group. A register, an electronic register of persons with disabilities was created for the purpose of establishing a single database on persons with disabilities and conducting country-wide disability data recording. Each year, government services are assessed via a special information system based on 155 criteria. 15 new criteria on disability have been included in the assessment criteria of the public services. Excellencies, the allegations of Armenia about the so-called blockade of the Lashin-Khankendi road are patently false and provocative. Azerbaijan has never created impediments for the freedom of movement on the road by the residents and its use for the supply of food, medicine, and other humanitarian purposes, as well as for access by the International Committee of the Red Cross. This is supported by numerous documented evidence that expose Armenia's fabrications. Occupation of our territories were accompanied by large-scale indiscriminate planting of mines by Armenia. Around 3,300 people became mine victims during the last 30 years. In the post-conflict period since November 2020, more than 300 Azerbaijani civilians and military have been killed or gotten disability as a result of mine terrorism, as Armenia fails to share accurate and comprehensive information about the hundreds of thousands of landmines it indiscriminately laid on Azerbaijan's territory. Landmines hinder the process of reconstruction and the return of IDPs, so we see a direct link between the SDGs and the mining efforts. Given the significance of this issue, Azerbaijan actively promotes the initiative of launching the 18th SDG on demining, as well as a proposal to establish a like-minded group of mine-affected countries. Finally, I would like to highlight that the Republic of Azerbaijan is working actively to create a fully accessible physical environment for persons with disabilities and strives to ensure their full inclusion in society. Thank you so much.
Agradecemos.
I thank the delegation of Azerbaijan and call on the delegation of Nicaragua. Thank you, Madam Vice President. Nicaragua, as a state party to the convention, welcomes this space where we can share achievements in the area of restitution of the rights of persons with disability. Our government continues to return the fundamental rights of persons with disability through planning and implementation of public policies which strengthen respect and inclusion, their inclusion as subjects of rights and economic actors. Nicaragua passed law number 763 on the rights of persons with disabilities, which establishes the legal framework and guarantees the promotion, protection, and assurance of full enjoyment in conditions of equality of all their human rights. We also named a special representative for the rights of persons with disabilities to defend the human rights of these persons. Through the program All with a Voice, our government strengthens the restitution of the rights of persons with disabilities in health, accessibility, and mobility. We have a national center of audiology and logopedia for children who have problems with language and audio. We have a national center for child mental health, SENADIS, and centers in Managua, Estelí, and Puerto Cabezas. We also have founded 99 homes for persons with special needs, 17 centers which implement conditions, the necessary conditions given disasters, whatever the persons with disabilities need. This guarantees fulfillment of all of their economic, human, social, and cultural rights. They provide people with disabilities of means and resources so that they can fully contribute to society. In this regard, to improve the life of persons with disabilities, we must put an end to the illegal, coercive unilateral measures which are an obstacle for developing countries in order to guarantee the right to free and universal quality inclusive education. Nicaragua reaffirms its full commitment to continue strengthening and working for the restitution of the rights of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Nicaragua, and I now invite the delegation of Yemen to make a statement.
السيد الرئيس أن الجمهورية اليمنية ومن منطلق إيمانها بتحقيق المساواة بين
believing in the equality of all citizens, including persons with disabilities. This is an indivisible part of our society. It was one of the first countries that ratified CRPD. Despite our difficult situation, we are trying to achieve the goals outlined in this convention. We issued numerous legislations and national laws to achieve the goals of this group. Law 61 of 1999 on enabling the persons with disabilities to achieve their rights, including free health care, as well as providing artificial limbs and assistive devices, in addition to enhancing employment opportunities for them in the public and private sectors, beginning with giving them concessional loans. In response to our commitment toward this group, the Fund for the Rehabilitation of and Care for the Disabled, under the supervision of the Ministry for Social Affairs, provides full educational and health care for persons with disabilities throughout all governorates, in addition to fulfilling their needs and safeguarding decent living. Persons with disabilities in Yemen are the most disadvantaged group given the war launched by the terrorist Houthi groups against the legislative and constitutional documents, as well as the National Convention and unanimity. This impeded their aspirations in equality on par with all the other groups of society. This also hampered the delivery of assistance to this group and their movement throughout the governorates because of the blockade imposed on them, in addition to the injuries resulting from the mines planted by these militias. My country stresses its firm commitment to promote the efforts deployed in favor of this group through the Ministry for Social Affairs and Employment, other relevant bodies, and the Care and Rehabilitation Fund for Persons with Disabilities. Our government is keen on achieving comprehensive and sustainable peace, lifting the human suffering with a view to enabling that group to obtain means of care and promote their role in society. Thank you, Madam.
I thank the representative of the delegation of Yemen, and I invite the delegation of San Marino to make a statement.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, San Marino is deeply concerned for the challenges and new threats that people with disabilities have to face in their daily life, including poverty, unemployment, risk of violence, and abuses. We need to address with urgency the needs of people with disabilities who have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. San Marino was among the first countries to sign and ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Since its ratification in 2008, we have been working on the implementation of the provisions and principles contained in CRPD through the establishment of the San Marino Commission. The CRPD says that disability has no longer to be conceived as a disease, but must be experienced in the awareness that diversity is part of human condition. From this new perspective, in San Marino, we have left behind a medical approach to disability in favor of a social perspective based on human rights and fundamental freedoms as set out in the CRPD. For several years, San Marino is taking this new approach, not only by enlarging the availability of new services, but also by taking decisions and adopting laws that concern directly persons with disabilities. In order to implement this new approach, we are involving San Marinese NGOs and persons with disabilities in institutional working groups. Following this new approach, one of the most recent measures taken in San Marino is the establishment of a disability help desk on December 2021. The main task of the desk is to inform, support and protect persons with disability with the aim to reach a better independence and social inclusion. In this context, we are also offering classes and projects for kids with intellectual disabilities. Madam Vice President, realizing the right of persons with disabilities is central for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and for our promise to leave no one behind. We need to build accessible, inclusive, and non-discriminatory societies where people with disabilities can fully participate in the political, social, and economic aspect of the community, where they are involved in the decision-making process and where their value is fully recognized. Madam Vice President, let me conclude by informing that San Marino will host the second conference of the UN WTO on accessible tourism in Europe, which will take place on 16 and 17 November 2023. Now it is the time to build back better, and San Marino is ready to do its part. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, representative of San Marino. I invite the delegation of Nepal to make a statement.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Based on WHO's recent estimates, 1.3 billion people, that is about 60% of the global population, experience some form of disability. The recent pandemic has worsened their condition, disproportionately affecting their smooth access to healthcare services, education, employment, and other basic services. More than ever, realizing the rights and meeting the needs of persons with disabilities is critical to leave no one behind. An overarching commitment of the 2030 Agenda is the underlying philosophy of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This will be possible only when they are treated with dignity and respect, and when they have access to all essential services, including health and education. Madam Vice President, as per the census 2022, almost 2.5% of the population has some form of disabilities in Nepal, of which more than one-third are persons with physical disabilities. Taking this into account, the Constitution of Nepal has ensured the rights of every person to live with dignity, the right of equality, and the right of social justice as fundamental rights. The Constitution guarantees their participation in Parliament through reservation quota and thus ensure job opportunities in the civil services also. Nepal has ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and enacted various laws, plans, and policies in line with its provisions. Nepal has enacted the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2017, which respects their civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights and ensures non-discrimination in workplaces and employment opportunities. It has ensured dignified participation of persons with disabilities in every walk of life. We have envisioned a disability-inclusive society which upholds the rights-based and non-discriminatory approach towards persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities are provided allowances, free education, scholarships, free healthcare services, and subsidized medicines, quotas in public and private job openings, discount on land and air transportation, facilities in rehabilitation and recreation, among others. To conclude, Madam Vice President, Nepal is committed to working with the international community to ensure an environment that enables persons with disabilities to earn a self-reliant and respectful living. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Nepal, and I now invite the representative of Bulgaria to make a statement.
Bueno, el orador de Bulgaria.
The representative from Bulgaria is not present, so we will close this session, and we will resume at 4:30 p.m. this afternoon with the participation of Kuwait. Good day to all. This is an important announcement. In 3 minutes, we will start a meeting with Roundtable 3, which was programmed to take place in this room. Okay.
Excelencias,
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, order in the room so that we can begin our Roundtable 3, the subject of which is reaching the underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities. It is my pleasure to co-chair, co-facilitate this roundtable together with my colleague from civil society, Ivonia, from the Mission Against Leprosy, headquartered in Timor-Leste. And I now give her the floor for a brief introduction.
Ana.
Thank you for this opportunity. I am Ana Ivonia Felipe Vital from Timor-Leste. Thank you.
Los llamados a la acción.
Calls to action and shared experiences shared by the panelists will make it possible for us to see opportunities for improvement in situations which are constant, in which most of these underrepresented groups in our peoples usually live. A first step aims at contributing to increasing representation in the political system, positioning gender equality, differentiated actions, and the empowerment of youth, women, and ethnic minorities in policies as a priority of the public agenda. This representation is made possible by a bet at the national level, which must be coordinated with local and regional actions in order to increase the presence of these underrepresented groups, and I repeat, youth, women, and ethnic minorities in institutions and of other key actors throughout the national territory of our peoples. This is implemented by promoting the participation of youth, women, and ethnic minorities in politics so as to increase representation in the political system and other decision-making spaces. In like manner, adequate representation can be consolidated by promoting initiatives of promotion and strengthening of citizen participation through educational tools and participatory processes which lead to having an impact on the formulation of public policies and their management. It is important to value each one of life's experiences, paths, and needs of the families of persons with disabilities in order to have different kinds of feasible interventions. For example, based on the associative movement, which includes information, orientation, emotional support, training, counseling, promoting participation, and therapy to allow for processes of empowerment and generational change. It is important to lay down the horizon to independence and associative participation as a framework for community intervention. For example, in our country, I represent Panama, we have developed focused entrepreneurial projects with seed capital for families that include a person with disabilities, be they in rural and local areas who live in situations of multidimensional poverty. This socioeconomic project mainly impacts on women who head their own households. Guaranteeing a better future for persons with disabilities will to a large extent depend on cooperation between activists and other actors, and this must proceed from a respectful debate and clarification in all bodies of the specifics of one and all, specific roles. One of the major obstacles found by managers in their community work is that of stereotypes. So constant consultation with the main actors is vitally important to counter discrimination. In this regard, each of the types of intervention offer minimum guidelines and differences among other initiatives so that underrepresented groups can move forward with their rights toward a state of well-being and sustainability. Spaces such as this and other awareness-raising strategies will be pivotal in strengthening this narrative and will lead it to concrete actions, partnerships, legislative initiatives, and political debates on budgetary and management issues so that no one is left behind. Thank you. Now let me introduce the panelists for this Roundtable 3, which I am co-chairing. I'm Edith González de Valenzuela. I am the director of the National Directorate for Disabilities in Panama. My co-chair, Ms. Ivonia, Ana Ivonia, will introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Dear colleagues, it is my great honor to introduce and invite our first panelist, Her Excellency Mrs. Heidi Jan, Chairperson of the China Disabled Person Federation, to the floor. Her Excellency Mrs. Heidi Jan, in addition to being the chairperson of the China Disabled Person Federation since 2008, is also the vice chair of the State Council Working Committee on Disability and the serving president of Rehabilitation International from 2016 until 2024. Mrs. Jan has decades of experience and practice in rights protection of persons with disabilities in China and beyond. She is a published author of full-length novels and was honored with Asia-Pacific Champions of Disabilities Rights by UNESCO. Mrs. Jan, the floor is yours. Please remember to keep to the 7-minute time limit for your presentation in order to allow for the maximum participation of distinguished delegates during the interactive discussion.
Thank you. Madam Co-Chairs, ladies and gentlemen, There are more than 1 billion persons with disabilities in the world. They were being underrepresented when participating in economic, social, cultural, and political life. Their voice is quite weak. However, their representation is a matter that bears on human rights protection. I've been thinking about the questions. Why are they underrepresented? Who shall listen to them? How do we promote their representation? Persons with disabilities are always facing barriers in public life, especially persons with psychosocial or intellectual disabilities, or those with cognition or speech impairment. They can barely express themselves. Persons with severe impairments, autism, and Alzheimer have a little voice even within their representative organizations. Some cannot even represent themselves. China is home to 85 million persons with disabilities, and the Chinese government has always attached great importance to their representation. China Disabled Persons Federation is a representative organization, and it represents and serves all persons with disabilities across the country so that their voice be heard, their human rights be respected, and equal opportunities to enjoy social and economic progress be guaranteed. Nowadays, the protection of rights and the interests of persons with disabilities have been included in more than 90 laws, and their opinions being solicited in the process of lawmaking or amendment. Nothing about us without us is transforming into everything about us with us. China places a high value on the participation of persons with disabilities in political life and express of views. As of today, over 6,000 persons with disabilities, their relatives, and personnel working for them are deputies to the People's Congress and members of the Political Consultative Conference across the country. They express opinions and exercise voting rights representing all persons with disabilities. A total of 40,000 disabled persons federations and 580,000 associations of various levels have been set up. Through them, the demands and claims of persons with disabilities are reflected to governments for consideration. In China, systems for providing living allowances for persons with disabilities in poverty and nursing subsidies for persons with severe impairments have been established. 26 million of them have benefited from this system, receiving financial support each month. It's worth to mention that more than 7 million impoverished persons with disabilities were lifted from absolute poverty in 2020. The Chinese government gives priority to the voice of women and girls with disabilities, safeguarding their rights and interests. I specifically requested that Disabled Persons Federation shall treat persons with disabilities as their families and reach out of them forwardly to ensure their voice be heard. Persons with severe impairments and those unable to express themselves are the most in need of our strong support for their representation. Each year, I go to the rural areas, to the communities, to the homes of persons with disabilities. Thus, I can get first-hand information on their situation and their needs. Rehabilitation is the urgent need for them. Considering the shortage of rehabilitation professionals in China, I propose building a national-level University of Rehabilitation Sciences in 2015 as a national political advisor in the CPPCC. This proposal had since been twice included into the National Economic and Social Development Plan. Today, the joint PhD of this university have graduated. It's our due responsibility and mission to represent persons with disabilities and to translate their aspirations into state actions. To promote their representation here, I'd like to call for the following. First, all states parties shall be committed to their obligations to the CRPD, including those related to representation of persons with disabilities, and make every attempt to ensure its full and effective implementation and achieve meaningful and practical results. Second, all states parties shall enhance exchange and cooperation and the framework of convention, squaring up to one's own issues, sharing experience, and making efforts to advance the well-rounded development of persons with disabilities. Third, I call upon the establishment of World Disability Organization, WDO, in the UN system so as to enhance coordination on disability issues globally. Dear friends, let's unite together and the framework of the CRPD to create an even better future for persons with disabilities. At the last, I want to say, welcome to visit us, China Disabled Persons Federation. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank Mrs. Heidi Jan for her excellent presentation. Our next speaker will be His Excellency Mr. Paweł Widowic, Secretary of State from the Ministry of Family and Social Policy of Poland. Mr. Widowic has been head of the Office for Disabled People at the University of Warsaw since 1997, where he established a support system for persons with disabilities and his work as a lecturer. For many years, he has been actively working for equal rights for persons with disabilities in Poland, culminating in his current post as Secretary of State at the Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Policy in Poland since January 2022. Secretary of State, the floor is yours and you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, when debating underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities, I want to point out that disability itself is one of the reasons for social exclusion. And the other important factor is refugees with disabilities who are particularly at risk of social exclusion. Because of the Russian aggression on Ukraine, over the last year, millions of Ukrainians came to Poland. Although many have since returned to Ukraine or left Poland for other countries, more than 1.4 million have registered for residence in Poland. From the early beginning of the war, we supported all Ukrainians, including persons with disabilities. The State Fund for Rehabilitation of Persons with Disabilities started the program called Assistance to Ukrainian Citizens with Disabilities with allocation of $32.5 million. Under this program, Ukrainian citizens with disabilities who are not registered as persons with disabilities according to Polish regulations can receive appropriate support. And the number of beneficiaries of this program reached already almost 23,000 persons. In the same time, Ukrainians with disabilities can apply for immediate recognition of their disability according to Polish law, and the number of disability certificates issued for refugees with disabilities from Ukraine is now 11,000. Regardless of nationality, persons with disabilities are one of the social groups that are at risk of social, professional, and educational exclusion. Many people are exposed to digital exclusion, which translates into limited activity in public life. Excluded people don't participate equally and fully in the local community. They struggle with a sense of social inferiority. It is crucial to respect the dignity of every human being, their autonomy, independence, and the freedom to make their own choices. It should be emphasized that persons with disabilities are a very diverse group. Research shows that persons with intellectual disabilities, mental disorders, women with disabilities, long-term unemployed or homeless persons are more exposed to cross-discrimination. These are groups of people more at risk of social exclusion. Attention should be paid to the group of people with disabilities who require alternative and supportive methods of communications. The inability to communicate with society is an important cause for the exclusion of persons with disability. This is why activities aimed at developing various methods of communication and new technologies supporting this process are so important, and they really break the barriers to participate in society. Providing a means of communication that enables understanding is essential. For example, sign language, braille, text readers, easy to understand text, alternative means of communications such as AAC, the use of counseling is crucial in this point. An important role in this process is played by non-governmental organizations working for persons with disabilities. It should be mentioned that persons with disabilities who are treated in overprotective way become dependent. And as a result, we can observe so-called acquired helplessness and dependence from the other persons. Therefore, the role of the state in providing persons with disabilities with conditions for an independent life is important. Community support and building support circles for such persons are particularly important. At the same time, it should be emphasized that the process of deinstitutionalization should particularly take into account persons with disabilities, including multiple disabilities, requiring intensive support, including round-the-clock support. A group particularly vulnerable to social exclusion are children with disabilities. Staying in foster care, therefore, the process of the institutionalization should take this group into account in particular. The Polish government continues its policy to ensure independent living for all persons with disabilities. All people with and without disabilities should have the right to make decisions about their lives and equal start and participation in the social life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State, for your contribution. Now it is my honor to present our next panelists. Dr. Christopher Nwanoro, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria. Dr. Nwanoro is a seasoned diplomat and foreign service officer, currently serving in the International Organization Department of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria. Dr. Nwanoro is visually impaired and is a stance advocate for the voiceless and those with disabilities in Nigeria. A recipient of numerous awards, with the culmination of one of the highest awards in Nigeria, that of the National Honors Award member of the Order of Federal Republic. Dr. Nwanoro, you have the floor, please.
Madam Chair, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to discuss on reaching the underrepresented group of persons with disability. Really, so much has been said about us, I mean persons living with disability. And today, we know that about 1 billion people in the world have one form of disability or the other. And that is about 15% of the world population. We have different types of disabilities: physical disability, visual impairments, hearing impairments, mental health, and other types of disabilities, as we know. In Nigeria, the government of Nigeria have done so much to ensure that persons with disabilities will be carried along in the scheme of things. In 2007, we ratified the CRPD, and in 2020, Nigerian government under the former President Muhammad Buhari, signed an act to enable persons with disabilities to be involved in all spheres of life. And because of that, Nigerian government have done, we are taking the first step, and other countries are following in Africa the step of Nigeria. So we know that persons with disabilities have been suffering, series of discrimination, marginalization, and inability to fit in the society. So, but today, even in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, the government have done so much by empowering our people through the policy of NSkill. NSkill means National Social Intervention Policy or Program. So we have NSkill too going on there, where people living with disabilities are empowered in various skills. They are trained so that they'll be able to take care of themselves and live independently. Economically, the government have been providing the means to enable these people to live comfortably, unlike in the past. So these are the things that government have been doing. Even in agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture equally have been doing so much. In the north, we have, in the northern part of Nigeria, take for instance from Yobe, according to research, Yobe, Katsina, Kaduna, and the Bauchi states. So these places, many people, the people living with disability, the men, they're always involved in agriculture, especially cropping. So they're involved in mixed cropping, such as rice, planting of rice, maize, guinea corn, and soya beans, where the women living with disabilities are involved in that of animal husbandry, and they do a lot to ensure that they have independence living, and government is empowering them financially and providing the tools to enable them execute these projects, and they are doing well on that. So government of Nigeria have been doing so much to carry everybody along, especially persons with disabilities. In 2020, National Commission for Persons with Disabilities was formed, and through that commission, a lot of things have been done for persons living with disabilities. They have extended that to all the states of the Federation. We have 36 states in Nigeria, including Abuja, the FCT. So we have state commissions for persons with disabilities, but the national one is the one overseeing all these states ones. So in various areas and skills, Nigerian government have done so much, and they trying to make sure that those discrimination and stigmatization that have besieged persons living with disabilities in the past is eliminated, if not completely eradicated. So these are the things that government of Nigeria have been doing all this while to ensure that we are carried along. I know that there have been so many challenges that people with disabilities are facing, not only in Nigeria, in other developing countries. When in the rural areas, some of them are, kept in the secret, they don't allow them to come out. Other times they call it a taboo or a cause of being disabled. That is what some people who are uninformed, the way they see persons living with disabilities. But today, lots of advocacy is going on. Enlightenment programs, they are going on. People are doing all sorts of programs to ensure that those genes are broken and people are well informed about the challenges faced by people with disabilities, and that people should be well educated about disability matters. So all this is what we are facing, and the government is doing so much, and even the different organizations of people living with disabilities are doing equally well. So most of them, they do programs, and governments, comes in turn to assist them and direct them. So lots of programs are going on in the country today, and everybody is, being informed very well. And the law, the acts that the government signed in 2019, have really helped us so much. The violation of this sense, attracts penalties. And the policies, when you look at the accessibility in the past, it becomes very difficult for persons living with disability to access public buildings. But today, governments have, given that instruction, and the law is really working, that every public building must be accessible for persons living with disability. So on all this, government is doing so much, and even the people too, the organizations, the NGOs, all of them are involved to ensure that all these are done. Though irrespective of this, we still know that there are still other challenges like assistive technology. Government is providing the one they can, they're all the same, but we still need more to empower others, to enable them, like wheelchairs, screen readers like JAWS and the rest of them, spectacles, motorized wheelchairs, and all that. So we need all this to enable those in the rural areas have access to them. The people in the rural area, through the State Commission for Persons Living with Disabilities, they're extending their hands to those people. In the federal level, the Federal National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, they're equally doing a lot. But we need to ensure that we do more. Discrimination, especially on women and girl child, is equally a serious issue that's being faced by persons living with disabilities, girl child education, and others. So we are calling on the United Nations and other NGOs that are taking care of persons living with disabilities to remember that persons with disabilities should be involved both in economic empowerment, in training, in education, in health, providing good health for them, and ensuring that they are not left behind. Remember, nothing for us without us. So the Nigerian government have done their own part, and we are still doing a lot. There are programs that government have already set out. The empowerment programs, we have programs, policy for albinism, we have policies for health, we have policies on agriculture, and we have policies that involves, independent living. So these are what the government have done and is still doing through the Commission and the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development. So I believe other states around, other countries around around Nigeria, like the West African countries, should do the part of Nigeria to ensure that their own people living with disabilities, should live well and should be recognized as human beings and not being treated or marginalized or being abandoned as if they are not human beings. And secondly, disability is not a cause. It can happen to anybody. Myself, I was not born blind. It happens to me when I was in the university some years back. So, but by the special grace of God, God has helped me through assistive technology and the assistance given to me by the government, that I've been able to attain the little higher that I am found myself today. So I know that by the time we extend this to those in the grassroots, in the rural areas, they too will be independent and live a better life. Madam Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I end my case here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Novanoro, for your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great honor to invite our next panelist, Ms. Mariangel Garcia Ramos Guadiana, the Executive Director of Women Enable International, based in Mexico. Ms. Guadiana has worked for the past 15 years as a human rights advocate, leader with a core focus on diversity, inclusion, gender, and disability. In her career, she is worked with different stakeholders such as Congress and legislation, government, private and sector, and higher education. She was also recently named the President of the Council for Persons with Disabilities for the state of Nuevo León, Mexico, a 5-year post where she will play a lead role in advancing the development of a state plan for disability inclusion. As founder of Mexicanas con Discapacidad, she established a national network of women with disabilities that center the voices and lived experiences of Mexican women with disabilities. I kindly invite Ms. Guadiana to deliver her presentation. Ms. Guadiana, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will be delivering my remarks in Spanish. Qué privilegio es poder hoy dar un mensaje.
What a privilege it is to be able to transmit a message today. I am a Mexican woman with disabilities, and I'm representing civil society from an organization where we think of ourselves as having disabilities and being feminists. And we work from the intersection of disability and gender, and we continue to integrate the principles of disability and justice, which are essential to guarantee that people with disabilities are respected, protected, and fulfilled. I recognize and welcome that at this COSP there are talks and discussions which recognize the importance of intersectionality. From that perspective, part of our unique experiences, we are shown the levels of exclusion and discrimination in which we live. We can, of course, also belong to other historically discriminated groups. There are key factors that contribute to the marginalization and exclusion of persons with disabilities in developing countries, and the lack of public policies and inclusive practices. There is not a single history of disabilities. Every experience is unique. It seems to me that what might seem complicated to understand these discriminations is to be able to separate or identify the identities that the discrimination is addressed to. I want to speak about two important points. The first one has to do with movement. I'd like to begin by speaking about the importance and the power of movements, beginning from the fact that representation is key, if not the most important, to guarantee that the voices of persons with disabilities who belong to other historically discriminated groups are present in decision-making spaces and have an impact on all levels, local, national, regional, and global. It is important today to recognize that there is a growing global movement on gender and disabilities. We see that constantly at the local level, where women with disabilities and persons of diverse gender with disabilities create collectives, smaller or larger, and they make themselves visible in decision-making spaces. To recognize their collective power, we must. And not to recognize this global movement would be to render invisible the local work that women and girls with disabilities are making. All these persons are changing the narrative. But we also have to influence at the local level, because there is a lot to connect there. I share with you a couple of examples. The first one is a local example, and that was the change in the general law of access of women to a life free from violence in Mexico. This is to protect women from violence through clear mechanisms. But this law did not include women with disabilities or indigenous women and others. It was through global organizations, including national and local movements of women, that these centers of justice were modified, and they now have accessibility and budget for these changes. This would not have happened without the political power that especially women with disabilities have been able to exercise from their own experiences. Now, a global example, that is the inclusive collective termed Equality Generation. This is a feminist with disabilities movement. They work in the feminist movement and in spaces of gender equality. This group was born when generation equality forums of the United Nations were not accessible and did not consider women and persons with disabilities in that space, as if we were to forget that women with disabilities are also women. This collective was established out of local individual experiences. And today we have the Accessibility Feminist Protocol. We have been part of that process, and we promote gender equality and the rights of women in general, and accessibility for women with disabilities as well. Through these examples, I emphasize the importance of leadership and intersectionality when designing strategies, public policies, and decision-making. This is for states, civil society, and including the private sector, including international donors, to transform their strategies. As a second point, on leadership with disabilities, diversity, and sustainability, I believe that one of the most important challenges is sustainability and work and leadership for disabilities. There is strength in diversity. We have seen this in the movement, but diversity of disabilities in itself has required this approach. Despite the diversity of the movement on the rights of persons with disabilities, we have been reluctant to adopt intersectionality in the way in which we promote the rights of persons with disabilities. I believe that this may be based on fear that if persons with disabilities don't completely agree with some positions or don't speak with a single voice, perhaps we're not heard at all. Thus, the movement for the rights of persons with disabilities should not be a monolith. As an organization which crisscrosses different movements, we have seen that diversity in these movements is a strength and not a weakness or a threat. This diversity leads to political policies and programs that include all persons with disabilities and not only those with access to power, given their positions in decision-making spaces based on sexism, racism, colonialism, etc. Thus, we must promote leadership with these intersectional perspectives. They must be diverse from the local to the global, and they must connect with other movements to have a more sustainable continuity in our work. I conclude by saying that not all persons with disabilities have the privilege of having a platform like I have here today. It is important to be able to be leaders with disabilities, and we must strengthen the capacity of these leaders by promoting consultations and sharing platforms. I think, dear states and countries, is where we will find the answer. In conclusion, to ensure that recognition of our rights with intersectional perspective, we must recall that we are a political force that must be recognized and that we will not go anywhere, although we may not please. There is a powerful value in diversity, and that is how we unlock bottlenecks Diverse leadership with disabilities are a key, and public policy must understand this. There can be nothing about us without us, and everything is about us. Every consultation process and initiative must be accessible. Movements and their voices must be recognized and listened to. We must think of budgets from the design. Otherwise, the convention will not be successful locally. Persons with disabilities cannot just be an add-on in decision-making at these times of hate speech. The responsibility of states for our rights is greater than ever. Our dignity is not negotiable, and learning lies on the strategic listening to our powerful, diverse disabilities voices. Thank you.
Ms. Guadiana, for your excellent presentation. Dear delegates, civil society friends, I once again would like to thank all of the panelists for sharing their knowledge and experiences with us today. I will now hand over the co-chairmanship back to Ms. Valenzuela, Vice President of the conference, who will continue to moderate our meeting today. Over to you, Ms. Valenzuela.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ivonia, and I'm pleased to announce that we will go on to the second part of this roundtable, which consists in the interactive debate. That is a dialogue that we will hold through delegations, and each delegation or the observers will be able to request the floor and by pressing the button from your seats. Now we will allow a bit of time so that you can request if you wish the floor.
Le vamos a dar la palabra.
We will give the floor to the first delegation on the list, but first I'd like to remind that you can ask your question or make your statement for two minutes. Egypt has the floor.
I'm Iman Karim, the head of the Council of Persons with Disabilities in Egypt. ألزم القانون الدولة بحماية حقوق
The law forces the country to protect persons with disability regards of the race, sex, religion, removing all the difficulties that prevent them from enjoying their rights. Disabled child rights have been protected as well and protected from threat, and his property will not be seized in a manner that threatens his freedom. Article 50 has been added to prevent bullying of the persons with disabilities, imposing penalties and punishment on the criminals. 2030 agenda is based on gender equality between men and women in all social, economic, and cultural rights. The national strategy has been launched to protect women and to as well as the national initiative to take care of the more marginalized groups, enabling them to seize the opportunities and to make their voices heard and to benefit from learning devices, in addition, including digital learning.
Muchas gracias a la
Thank you, representative of Egypt. Before I give the floor to the next delegate, I would like to ask you please to identify yourselves and to give the name of your delegation or the organization you represent. I'll now call on Singapore.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, panelists, for the rich and candid sharing. I'm Joan, a youth delegate from Singapore. I have a visual impairment, and I am a national athlete. Singapore agrees that intersectional forms of discrimination against women with disabilities must be addressed in a multifaceted manner. In Singapore, women and girls with disabilities enjoy the same rights and recognition under the law as women and girls without disabilities. Singapore has been party to the Convention of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women since 1995. The principles of equality for women is entrenched in Article 12 of the Singapore Constitution, and our Women's Charter protects and advances these rights, including institutionalizing the equal standing of men and women in marriage and ensuring that the welfare of protection of women in Singapore. We are also entrenching flexible work arrangements as a workplace norm. Such work arrangements can benefit women with disabilities who may find
Muchas gracias a la representante.
I thank the representative of Singapore, and I call on the delegation of Turkey.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the delegation of Turkey. We would also like to thank the panelists for their important insights. Turkey develops its policies and services by considering all segments of the society, including the underrepresented groups. Within this context, a transformation from institutional care to community-based service approach is taking place. Thus, daycare services, home care support services, and home care allowance are provided to encourage independent living for persons with disabilities based on their preferences. In addition, services such as guidance, counseling, and psychosocial services are provided to support families of persons with disabilities. Capacity building efforts have been increased in community-based services in cooperation with relevant stakeholders, including civil society, to ensure that refugees, migrants, and those under temporary protection can benefit more effectively. Moreover, a project for social inclusion of persons with mental disabilities have been implemented in cooperation with World Health Organization to support the social inclusion of persons with mental disabilities by increasing the quality of community-based support services. The second National Action Plan on Persons with Autism Spectrum Disorder was announced on the 2nd of April 2023. It was drafted up in coordination with public institutions, universities, and civil society organizations of or for persons with autism. The action plan aims to promote the participation of persons with autism into social life without discrimination, to increase the quality of services at the central and local level, and finally to combat discrimination against persons with autism. I thank you.
Thank you very much, representative of Turkey. And now, the delegation of South Africa has the floor.
Madam Moderator and Excellencies, the Constitution of South Africa is founded on the values and principles of dignity, respect, and equal opportunities for all, as captured in our Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights in Section 9 guarantees that all people are equal and no person should be discriminated against, amongst others, on the basis of disability. South Africa has a diverse population which includes the underrepresented section of persons with disabilities. Part 2 of South Africa's White Paper on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities recognizes the diverse population of persons with disabilities who experience compounded and intersecting marginalization. Persons with disabilities experience more severe forms of isolation and discrimination. Our government is taking concerted efforts to redress the marginalization of these neglected populations of persons with disabilities. This includes mainstreaming children with disabilities previously left out from the education system, such as children with autism, Down syndrome, and children with severe disruptive behavior. These children have been identified to receive primary school education, psychosocial services, and basic health services. This has been reinforced through a judicial precedent that recognizes the importance of prioritizing children from these groups to receive education, health services, and psychosocial interventions. We are also seeking to transform employment practices through different incentive measures that encourage and promote the public and private sector to meet and increase their targets of employing people with disabilities. There is also a desire for the focus to be on those persons with disabilities that have been excluded within the employment sector, such as persons who are deaf, persons with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, delegation of South Africa. I now give the floor to New Zealand.
Kia ora tātou. My name is Paula Tiserera. I'm head of the New Zealand delegation and chief executive of Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People. Thank you to the panel for your valuable insights shared today. Addressing intersectionality is a critical part of New Zealand's disability inclusion work. A priority area that needs to be addressed in New Zealand to reach the underrepresented groups in the disabled population is a sustained focus on intersectionality. The ways in which different aspects of a different person's identity can expose them to multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, marginalisation, and disadvantage. And it's imperative to apply an intersectional lens to legislation, policy, and service planning. Another priority area that needs to be addressed in New Zealand is the lack of intersectional lens being applied to the collection of data. More data is being collected in key government surveys and admin data, but more detailed and precise data on small subpopulation groups is necessary. More disability research on intersectional issues also needs to be promoted. We would like to ask the panel for any innovative recommendations on how to improve data collection and disaggregation for all persons with disabilities. Ngā mihi, thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, delegation of New Zealand. Now we follow the same method. After 5 delegations, we give an opportunity to an NGO to speak. And now we give the floor to Defence for Inclusion.
Queensland Advocacy for Inclusion is an Australian disability advocacy NGO. With today's focus on underrepresented people with disability, we recall people currently locked up in institutions. The equal right of all people with disability to live in the community, as described in the deinstitutionalisation guidelines, is being compromised by the presence of contemporary forms of institutionalisation. Whilst we welcome the Disability Royal Commission, we remain concerned about insufficient protections against torture, abuse and neglect of institutionalised people with disability. In particular, the indefinite detention of people with cognitive impairments and psychosocial disability. QAI regularly visits people in psychiatric institutions and in our forensic disability service. These visits inform our call for the full and immediate implementation of the deinstitutionalisation guidelines, the full and immediate implementation of the optional protocol for the Convention Against Torture, and the immediate release of all people with disabilities held in indefinite detention. Last year, the UN Committee Against Torture raised serious concerns about Australia's arbitrary and indefinite detention of people with disability in psychiatric and forensic disability institutions, including the use of restraints, seclusion, and disproportionate periods of detention. Despite these concerns, a visit by the UN Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture was cancelled last year, due in part to a refusal to allow visits to psychiatric institutions and the Forensic Disability Service in Queensland. We cannot remain silent on the indefinite detention of people with disabilities. Institutionalisation is a discriminatory act of violence and must be dismantled to fully implement the Convention on the Rights of People with Disability.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Representative of the NGO, QAI, the delegation of Guyana has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Keon Chung, and I'm the Assistant Chief Education Officer with responsibility for special education needs and disabilities. Since the Persons with Disabilities Act was passed in Guyana's National Assembly, a number of initiatives have been implemented geared towards improving the lives of persons with disabilities. Some of these initiatives include cash grants, mapping of children with disabilities, and creating disability-friendly spaces. Various ministries have designed policies and programs in keeping with supporting persons with disabilities. For example, comprehensive evaluations via an interdisciplinary approach in keeping with best practices, reviewing and implementation of policies and rehabilitative services via an aquatic therapy pool. All students enrolled in nursery education will be screened for cognitive and developmental disabilities upon entering nursery school commencing this year. Chair, as part of the government's initiatives to reduce inequities in education, children with disabilities will benefit from the improvement and creation of special education needs, disability classrooms in mainstream settings. The first associate's degree in special education began this year. Further, the collective efforts of ministries will see youth with disabilities gainfully employed and, by extension, contributing to the economic development of Guyana. To this end, learning facilities have been constructed and courses are currently being offered. The government of Guyana works with civil society to improve services to this underrepresented group. This initiative bears fruits as some students with disabilities have become members of robotics clubs and have participated in national science fairs. Chair, the diversity of societies, inclusive of persons with disabilities, can aid in strengthening the fundamental human rights, thereby ensuring that the Sustainable Development Goals.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Delegation of Guyana. I now welcome the representative of Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Maria Montefusco from the National Agency for Participation in Sweden in the Swedish delegation. Our topic is about the underrepresented groups in the area of democratic participation, with elections as an example. The right to vote and freedom of expression are fundamental human rights, and during the last years, many countries have made substantial efforts to improve legislation and practice as a result of the implementation of the UN CRPD. However, the opportunity and practical possibility to vote independently and in secret, to form a political opinion and to access information that enable the democratic participation is still lacking in many countries. Especially for people with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities meet major challenges. In Sweden, the exception to the right to vote for persons with intellectual disabilities and mental illness was removed in 1989. The first time the right to vote was possible to use for everyone was in 1991. But still today, data collected by Statistics Sweden show that fewer persons with disability vote in elections than people without disabilities. In Sweden, we still have challenges with accessibility in election systems and barriers that need to be removed so that all voters with disabilities can participate in elections on equal grounds with others. Not least, is it important that staff at the polling stations, often volunteers, are given the right training to give adequate support to voters. We find it there's an urgent need for society to actively request the views of persons with disabilities mirror their lives and key topics in media and in the political debate. And we would like to ask the distinguished panel if there are any examples and good practices to share when it comes to efficiently promote the democratic participation for persons within.
Thank you, Representative of Sweden. And I now call on the delegation of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Thank you very much. My name is Ivonia Sambo, Minister responsible for persons with disabilities. Here, I wanted to support the recommendation made by Ms. Yang from China as regards the establishment of a mechanism within the United Nations which would strengthen coordination on the subject of persons with disabilities. I'm a government minister and I work with the various different United Nations agencies, but there isn't a single agency that is specifically responsible for persons with disabilities, and this raises problems when it comes to coordinating support. It's time for the United Nations to understand that with the signing of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which brought about a new approach, a rights-based approach. This was a new approach that was not known to many, including decision makers. And when we worked on the rights of persons with disabilities without there being an agency or a United Nations mechanism specialized on the subject of the rights of persons with disabilities, to provide technical assistance, material and even financial assistance where necessary, the issue may not receive the necessary response, both at state level or within civil society. And that's why I support the idea of having this mechanism within the United Nations that would support states. And I would like to ask for greater synergy of action so that we can make headway towards the creation of that mechanism. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, delegation of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I now call on the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Eli, and I'm a humble member of the delegation of the Syrian Arab Republic. We won't be speaking about any of the achievements or the challenges. That's where our general debate statement will contain all of this manners, actually. But I would like to thank the panelists for their presentations. And to be specific, the presentation provided by Her Excellency Mrs. Heidi Zhang, when she spoke about people who can't represent themselves, like the people with autism, which is completely correct. And in Syria, yes, we're suffering a lot, and especially people with disabilities are suffering more as a vulnerable category after 12 years of war and the suffocating sanctions against the people in Syria. And that's not enough. We had the earthquake last February, which was a destructive one. So, ma'am, I would like to ask, what do you think are the key factors that contribute to the marginalization and exclusion of people with disabilities in developing countries or least developing countries now, when we are talking about Syria, unfortunately, and how can these factors be eliminated through inclusive policies and practices? I thank you.
I thank the Syrian Arab Republic for its statement, and I call on the delegation of Malta for its statement.
Rhoda Garland from the Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disability. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to Rita Vella, a friend and colleague, one of the first disabled activists in Malta and a champion of independent living, who sadly passed away earlier today and is going to be very greatly missed. We would like to thank the speakers on the panel and to share our experiences of including those disabled people who are most left behind. Earlier this year, the government set up Engage, a civil society participation mechanism in terms of Article 4.3 of the CRPD that involves disabled people from different walks of life in policy and decision-making, whilst effecting outreach to specific groups such as those disadvantaged due to regional considerations or specific protected characteristics such as gender and ethnicity. Through its various schemes and services, Agencia Support, Malta's state disability service provider, assists persons with disability in an individualized manner, including those from underrepresented groups, including persons with psychosocial, intellectual, sensorial and developmental disabilities, children and women with disabilities, amongst others. A consultative committee made up of persons with disabilities and also NGO fora have been established that tackle policies related to the agency and their inclusion of persons with disability in decisions that affect them to ensure their voices are heard. The Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disability, Malta's independent monitoring mechanism, reaches out to underrepresented groups through its Council for the Rights of Persons with Disability, an Article 33.3 mechanism, as well as through its Consultative Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities and through its Young People's Disability Rights Forum, which all feed back into the Engage mechanism. Thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the delegation of Malta, and we invite the NGO from Australia to give its statement.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Woodward, and I am the Education Program Associate for the National Down Syndrome Society. Last year, I graduated from George Mason University, where I received my bachelor's degree in sociology with a concentration in inequality and social change. In addition to my work with the education program at NDSS, I am a fierce advocate on Capitol Hill with our policy team. People with disabilities, especially those with Down syndrome, are underrepresented due to a lack of awareness, stigma, discrimination, barriers to accessing services and opportunities, and exclusion from decision-making processes. Everyone needs to ensure involvement of groups of individuals with Down syndrome on a global level by supporting and engaging with organizations that advocate for their rights and needs, encouraging and demonstrating inclusion in existing community leadership committees and other engagement opportunities so they can have a voice and influence in matters that affect them. Some of the benefits of involving groups of people with Down syndrome more actively are increased visibility, empowerment, self-esteem, social inclusion, and recognition of contributions and potential. This can also lead to more awareness and respect for the human rights and dignity among the general public and policymakers. Additionally, involving groups of people with Down syndrome can enrich the diversity and creativity of the global community and foster a culture of solidarity and mutual support. When I transitioned to high school, I was not seen as a valued member of the school community. The principal and program director projected their low expectations on me and recommended that I be placed in a separate special education program. Had my mom, grandmother, and I not advocated for my educational rights to access the general education curriculum, I would have sadly been shunted down the school to shuttled workshop pipeline. People with disabilities and those with Down syndrome want to be seen as human beings with feelings, wants, desires, dreams, and abilities, not for our disability diagnosis. That's why we must be at the decision-making table when the decisions are being made about us, our lives, and our future. It will take all of us, society, non-disabled people, the government, the social model of disability, families, the medical community, people with disabilities, etc., to make a difference and societal change until society realizes that people with disabilities are human beings with inherent rights, wants, needs, desires, and dreams. People with disabilities and those with Down syndrome will never be equal in society. Inclusion benefits everyone if they are just given the opportunity to do so. We must bring ableism, seclusion, exclusion, discrimination, oppression, and segregation to an end. Please, do the right thing. Nothing about us without us.
Agradecemos.
We thank the statement by the NGO from Australia, and we call on the National Human Rights Institution from India.
Dear Vice President, Excellencies, I am Arun Mishra, Chairperson, National Human Rights Commission, India. Standards for accessibility have been defined in India in the Act of 2016. Now the challenge is to create awareness. In India, disabled are called especially abled to provide them dignity and improve their mindset. Preparation of education and other material for primary to secondary level education in sign languages, braille, audio, visual mode, print and electronic media is being focused upon. Separate national level institutes have been set up for visual, speech and hearing, intellectual, multiple, locomotor, disabilities, rehabilitation and training, mental health and retardation. They are providing specialized postgraduate degree courses, diploma, imparting vocational training, clinical services, running indoor hospitals and providing OPD services. Regional centers are also functional. The convention provides concept of reasonable opportunity. It is required to be defined properly as it is culminating into proportionate opportunity which is restrictive in nature. The opportunities for employment should not be denied by a prescription of the kind of disabilities. Full opportunity should be afforded to ensure need-based distributive justice. Discrimination in adoption must come to an end. Physical, mental and emotional stability needs to be redefined. The Commission has issued advisories in relation to prevention of visual impairment of children by toys, crackers and chemicals. Concept of informed consent for surgery excludes severe disability which is often misused. We have to specify the circumstances and restrict its use. In the draft National Action Plan 2022, the Commission has recommended for a special treatment for women to inch towards the much desired gender justice. Accessible India campaign is in vogue for digital health literacy, audit of building for accessibility in prison, beggar home.
Gracias.
I thank the delegation of the institution, the National Human Rights Institution of India, an NGO, and we now give the opportunity to the delegation of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. My name is Saima. I'm counselor at the Permanent Mission of Pakistan. Let me at the outset thank the panelists for their insights, sharing of best practices and national experiences. My delegation is especially inspired by the developments and achievements on human rights for persons with disabilities in China, which hosts one of the largest persons with disabilities in the world, 85 million. Therefore, we would like to request Ms. Zhang Hedi to provide us information regarding some of the best practices and positive developments in China with regard to representation and inclusion of persons with disabilities in the decision-making process. Because inclusion of persons with disabilities in the decision-making process will bring about a transformation in our societies, how we function and how we operate. Thank you.
I thank the delegation of Pakistan. I thank the delegation of Pakistan, and I now call on the delegation of Qatar.
السيد الرئيس، السيدات والسادة، لقد تمكنت بلاد قطر.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Ladies and gentlemen, Qatar has been able to do a great deal for persons with disabilities, in particular in public life, as well as legislatively. These achievements include the creation of institutions specialized in persons with disabilities. By way of an example, the Al-Shafala Center, which has received various different regional and international prizes, the Mother Center as well, which is #1 internationally in terms of the services it provides to persons with disabilities. We've also launched a handbook for care providers to strengthen the quality of services provided to persons with disabilities. What's more, we are working to grant universal coverage to the entire population with disabilities to ensure that they are integrated into public sector employment. Ladies and gentlemen, the regulatory and legislative environment in Qatar has made it possible to integrate persons with disabilities and find employment for them. This was achieved via a specialized committee. This committee is supported by the government of Qatar. Digital accessibility and techniques and technologies for supporting persons with disabilities, in particular persons with visual and hearing impairments, are helping those people to continue their educations. It should be mentioned that several of these students were able to receive diplomas as a result.
I thank the delegation of Qatar, and we thank each and every one of the delegations who have spoken. And now we will respond to the questions that have been raised, and I invite the panelists to be ready. And I first call on the first panelist, Mrs. Heidi Shang.
I thank our friends from Pakistan for raising those questions, and I thank you for your interest and support in China's disability agenda. I would like to say that the disability agenda in China figures prominently on Chinese government agenda. It's part of our development affairs agenda, and it's an important priority for socioeconomic development. We are not leaving any PWD behind in sports, cultural life, in every part of our social life. We are advancing the work related to disability. We're not just paying lip service. We are doing real work to make sure that people with disability are lifted out of poverty. Only when they are out of poverty can they develop further. Because I just mentioned that we prioritize the employment of women with disabilities. We have launched arts and crafts workshop for women with disabilities across the country. In addition, this year, we have done something very important. We will enact a new law on accessibility. While developing this piece of law, we have consulted over 50,000 people with disability and elder people. And more people with disabilities can express their voices, and this is very important. And we have to pay attention to the rights of expression of those people with disabilities, especially those voiceless people with disabilities. We have to listen to the voices of their relatives, their friends and families, and colleagues. And we have to heed their voices and speak for them. And we have done many things for these group of people, and we hope that our friends and people in the room, you're all welcome to visit China, because seeing is believing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I now call on the second panelist, Mr. Paweł Wdowik. And I remind the panelist that you have 2 minutes for your statement.
Thank you very much. I would like to point especially to the aspects which were mentioned by some persons speaking during our panel. I mean especially the issue of the reasons of social discrimination, social marginalization, and exclusion of persons with disabilities. And the crucial point which we discover in Poland is the system which patronizes overprotective system, which in fact discriminates by taking out the right to decide about themselves from persons with disabilities, especially with intellectual disabilities. Moreover, some very modern states, let's put it in this way, use the standards which refuse the right to live for persons with like Down syndrome or other disabilities. So the right to decide about themselves, the right to decide and make choices, and bringing the space for building independent life. This is the crucial thing for making the persons with disabilities with full participants of social life. And Poland is doing this for last 5 years with determination to fully implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now call on the third panelist, Dr. Christopher Nwanoro.
Am I okay? Nigeria had over 31 million people living with disabilities. So I'm going to respond to some of the questions asked by the people on the floor. Number one, Nigeria, based on the fact that we have a larger number of persons living with disabilities, in the past, we have some challenges. The challenges being that people who are disabled find it difficult to go to school. But government have made it possible and compulsory education free for persons living with disabilities. So this have empowered them and has equally assisted people living with disabilities to go to school and acquire education. So education is part of the good thing that has happened to us. Like myself, I said before, I was not born blind. I met it as an undergraduate in the university. When I lost my sight, I thought there was no hope for me to, go to school. And in the course of doing that, I was hiding. I don't want people to know that I will become a blind person. So I was hiding from anytime people comes around. But when I realized the importance of going to school, I went to school, and today I've been able to overcome the challenges that goes with disability. So Nigerian government have done so much on this area, but all the same, there are other factors that have affected persons living with disabilities. Those factors such as health challenges. So the area of health, in the past, they don't have a good health, facilities or health scheme to enjoy. So when you have a challenge, issues like cataract, it can lead to blindness. A person who have a little challenge of, accident and all that, they find it difficult to get themselves, get the good treatment. So that leads to a series of disabilities. But in Nigeria, all these things have been taken care of through the Commission, National Commission for Persons with Disabilities, Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, and other areas where we have people being taken care of. So these have equally assisted us a lot in becoming independent and useful to ourselves, and most importantly, contributing to the national development. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And I now call on the fourth panelist, Ms. Maria Angel Garcia Ramos. Thank you very much. I would like to respond to a couple of questions. The first one had to do with what contributed to the marginalization in developing countries. We have been considered as incomplete beings from way back in history, and decisions have been taken for us. Public policy today, we can say that they exist, but we wonder whether they actually function. I expressed in my statement that there is no single history of disability, and it's not the same existence about one woman with disabilities or another woman with disabilities who may be Afro-descendant or indigenous. So we have to question ourselves as to whether the policies we're devising are working for all persons with disabilities, and we don't create something that we think will work for them. I think everything has to do with not having access to education or employment, and we only which not only want manual employment, but we want all opportunities. So everything is interconnected. And the second part, New Zealand asked us about how to improve on data collection. This has to do with how to get intersectional data. Again, people with disabilities, we are not a monolith, so it's important to ask, in addition to the different types of disabilities, what other contexts are there which also make us be discriminated against? And then we can really have data which help create public policy and projects which give us a better life with access to all of our rights. Thank you.
Damos las gracias.
We thank all the panelists for their excellent participation, and I give the floor to Ms. Ivonia, my co-chair, who will also make a final statement.
Thank you for this opportunity. Distinguished guests, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure and honor to be here and to be the representative of millions of persons affected by leprosy today. I am Ivonia Felipe Vital from Timor-Leste. I am 22 years old. I am fourth of 6 siblings, and I am currently studying public health while supporting the work of the Leprosy Mission and the Leprosy Association in Timor-Leste. I was diagnosed with leprosy in 2019 when the Leprosy Mission did health promotion in my village and screened my family. I had skin patches in my left hand. big enough for people to see from a distance. I had weakened my fingers and they had started to claw. Those I made would look at me with disgust. The patches had been with me for about 5 years, following me throughout my high school experience. The suffering was not only physical, but mental and social too. I believe that all of you here experienced physical and social distance during COVID. Did any of you enjoy that isolation and loneliness? Because of the stigma of leprosy, a preventable, curable, mildly infectious disease. That was my high school experience. I didn't have friends at high school. Even my very close neighbors didn't want to get close to me. Even today, I feel like I still experience this isolation when people find out that I had leprosy. This is what the voice of an underrepresented person sounds like. Because my story not unique among persons affected by leprosy. Millions of us have stories of rights stolen, stigma, fear, and discriminatory laws. Rob us of the stigma, rights to education, to jobs, to family, to health, and to so much more. We have heard the global slogan of leaving no one behind, but we still feel we haven't been included yet. If you want to reach underrepresented group of persons with disabilities, you have got to start with the millions of persons affected by leprosy across Asia, Africa, and South America. You could expand that to the 1.7 billion people like me who are affected by neglected tropical disease. If you are listening to my work right now, I ask you, how do you relate to leprosy and to entities? How can you ensure our voice and our rights are included? We are organized association of persons affected. We have strong grassroots networks. We can help you to reach the underrepresented voices of young people, older persons, women, people in rural communities, in poor communities. And in a small nation like Timor-Leste, across the world, we are looking to partner with the people, organizations, and governments that are represented at this conference. So seek us out and find partnership with us. We are tired of not seeing change. I ask you to take action so that this roundtable is more than just word, but becomes about achieving rights. Thank you for your time.
Le doy las gracias.
I thank my colleague Ivonia for very important considerations. And I dare present a request for each one of us, representatives on this subject before our states' parties, to fight to eliminate discrimination. If we eliminate discrimination, that word of underrepresented disappears. Now I will present a brief summary of the more relevant points that have been raised at this meeting. At this roundtable, there was general recognition of the fact that we should do more to reach underrepresented groups of persons with disabilities so they can live independently and be included significantly in their communities. In particular, we heard that we have to increase the inclusion of children, youth, women, and people from ethnic minorities with disabilities, as well as those who have psychosocial and intellectual disabilities, people with severe impediments, migrants, refugees with disabilities. These people face many barriers, including stereotypes, discrimination, barriers to their public participation, violence, and abuse. Panelists and participants have shared inspiring actions to meet these challenges, focusing on pension systems for persons with disabilities, especially those who live in poverty, in universities who have decided to train and educate persons with disabilities, flexible rules in the jobs, to mechanisms through which refugees with disabilities may request recognition of their disabilities and support services in their communities. To advance with the inclusion of underrepresented groups, speakers highlighted the need to respect the rights of all persons with disabilities and suggested better investments on the guidance, investment, and processes to empower persons with disabilities, to promote participatory processes in decision-making with consultation of underrepresented groups, the inclusion of underrepresented groups in laws which are relevant to them, the establishment of physical and virtual spaces which are accessible, accessibility of all public buildings, the production of data on underrepresented groups, and greater cooperation among all states parties on this subject. Thank you for a productive discussion where we have shared concrete solutions. Greetings and blessings.
Declaramos la...
We declare this meeting closed.